In the centuries following the fall of the Zhou Dynasty, China had been bound together under the rule of the Zhou kings, a network of feudal states recognizing the mandate of heaven and bound by ritual and tradition. Yet as the centuries wore on, the authority of the Zhou court, once absolute and revered, diminished like a candle flickering against the winds of ambition and local power. By the late spring and autumn period, the great dukes of Zhou were no longer mere vassals, but autonomous lords in all but name. The elegant ceremonies and formal hierarchies of the past gave way to intrigue, deception, and the ceaseless clamor for supremacy. It was in this liminal space of fading central authority and rising local power that the Warring States period would be born. A time when kingship was no longer a guarantee of obedience, and the dreams of conquest and dominion animated every corner of the Chinese heartland. The early 5th century BCE was a moment of reckoning. The vast plains of the Yellow River, once fields of tribute and obedience to the Zhou, had become arenas of competition and ambition. Within the northern heartlands, the state of Jin, one of the Zhou's long-standing pillars, fractured into warring factions. These noble clans, driven as much by pride as by the strategic calculations of land and resources, eventually shattered Jin entirely. From its remains arose 3 new kingdoms, Han, Wei, and Zhao, each staking claims to territory, authority, and the legitimacy once conferred by the Zhou king. Farther east, the state of Qi commanded the Shandong Peninsula with a sophistication of administration and commerce that made it a formidable force, while Chu dominated the south with a blend of northern military techniques and southern cultural distinctiveness. In the west, Chen lay somewhat on the frontier, its lands rugged but its ambitions boundless, its rulers vigilant and relentless. To the northeast, Yan faced the expanse of steppes, guarding its borders against the nomads beyond, while Han, squeezed between its more powerful neighbors, navigated survival through diplomacy and intermittent conflict. In these 7 states, Qin, Chu, Qi, Yan, Han, Zhao, and Wei, the stage was set for one of the most extraordinary epochs in human history, where war, philosophy, and administration collided in a tumultuous crucible. The Warring States era was not born of a single cause, but of a convergence of pressures, the disintegration of the Zhou feudal hierarchy, the relentless ambition of local lords, the economic and demographic growth of the regions under their control, and the emergence of ideologies that sought to explain, justify, or exploit the chaos. As the Zhou kings became ceremonial shadows, each rising lord asserted his claim to the mandate of heaven, no longer relying on the old feudal oaths, but on conquest, cunning, and the strength of his armies. The political landscape was fluid. Alliances were formed as swiftly as they were broken, treaties were ephemeral, and intrigue became as deadly as the battlefield. Diplomats and strategists moved through courts like chess pieces, manipulating rivalries and orchestrating campaigns designed to expand dominions and destabilize neighbors. It was a period in which the lives of ordinary peasants were bound inexorably to the ambitions of kings, generals, and ministers, and where the death of a single ruler or the success of a single army could reshape the map of a continent. The military innovations of the period transformed warfare itself. Once, chariots had defined the aristocratic battlefield, symbols of noble prowess and ritualized combat. In the Warring States, iron replaced bronze, mass conscription replaced the traditional retinues of nobility, and the rise of infantry and cavalry transformed the plains into theaters of enormous armies, moving with unprecedented precision. Crossbows allowed ordinary foot soldiers to wield devastating force, and siege engines and mobile units brought the ability to breach fortifications and compel entire populations to surrender. Commanders such as Bai Qi of Qin, Wang Jian, and Li Mu of Zhao were celebrated not merely for courage, but for tactical brilliance, for their ability to orchestrate movements of hundreds of thousands of men across vast distances. The scale of these armies, reaching hundreds of thousands in some engagements, demanded a level of logistics and administration unparalleled in earlier Chinese history. Grain, weapons, and supplies had to move with precision. Roads and canals were dug to facilitate mobility, and the collection of taxes and levies became a strategic instrument in sustaining the engines of war. Among the most decisive and brutal engagements of this period was the Battle of Changping, a confrontation between Qin and Zhao that would become legend. Qin's general Bai Qi encircled and starved a massive Zhao force numbering in the hundreds of thousands, ultimately executing the prisoners in an act of ruthless statecraft that reverberated through all the kingdoms. Such battles were not anomalies. The campaigns of the warring states were characterized by staggering loss of life, the annihilation of enemy forces, and the strategic use of terror to enforce political aims. Yet, despite these catastrophic defeats, the resilient economies and administrative sophistication of the states allowed them to recover, rebuild armies, and continue the struggle, creating a cycle of war and reconstruction that defined the era. The Warring States period was also a time of profound cultural and intellectual flowering. As the chaos of war threatened the very fabric of society, scholars and philosophers offered competing visions of order, governance, and human conduct. Confucianism, with its insistence on ethical leadership, ritual propriety, and moral cultivation, sought to restore harmony and hierarchy amidst the disarray. Taoism counseled alignment with the natural world, emphasizing simplicity, non-interference, and the cultivation of inner virtue, offering a philosophical refuge from the ceaseless ambitions of rulers. Legalism, in contrast, proposed a stark and uncompromising framework. Human beings were inherently self-interested, and only strict laws, rigorous punishment, and centralized power could secure stability. Each philosophy found patrons among the courts, shaping policies and influencing the decisions of rulers as they navigated the violent currents of the age. The intellectual ferment was as intense as the military strife, producing ideas and debates that would resonate for centuries and fundamentally shape Chinese governance, ethics, and social structure. Economic development paralleled these military and intellectual transformations. The demands of war accelerated the construction of roads, canals, and irrigation systems. Markets grew, urban centers expanded, and trade networks extended across vast distances, facilitating the movement of goods and the collection of revenue. Agricultural innovations increased productivity, supporting larger populations and, by extension, larger armies. Social structures, though hierarchical, began to exhibit limited mobility. Skilled administrators, engineers, and military officers could rise in influence despite humble origins, creating a nascent meritocratic ethos that would later crystallize under imperial rule. Yet for most commoners, life remained arduous, dominated by labor in the fields, service to the state, and vulnerability to the tides of war. Against this backdrop of ceaseless struggle, diplomacy and strategy played as critical a role as brute force. The states engaged in complex systems of alliances and betrayals, employing spies, emissaries, and manipulators to shift the balance of power. The vertical and horizontal alliances epitomized this strategic sophistication. Some states banded together against stronger rivals, while others sought individual advantage through opportunistic treaties. Success in this arena required shrewd calculation, adaptability, and sometimes sheer audacity. Tales of courtiers such as Su Qin, who navigated these alliances with subtlety and skill, illustrate the importance of intellect alongside military might. Thus, by the mid-3rd century BCE, the stage was set for an inexorable march toward unification. Qin, long perceived as a peripheral power, had harnessed its geography, military innovations and legalist administration to become dominant. Chu, Zhao, Ke, and the other states were weakened by decades of attrition, internal rebellion, and economic strain. The path to imperial consolidation was paved with strategy, siege, and blood, and it would culminate in the rise of Qin Shi Huangdi, the first emperor, who would finally unify the fragmented kingdoms into a single empire. The Warring States period was therefore both a time of devastation and of creation. Armies swept across the land, leaving destruction in their wake. Yet in the aftermath of each battle, states rebuilt, markets revived, and infrastructure expanded. Philosophers debated the nature of humanity and governance, while engineers and artisans transformed the landscape and military technology. The age forged not only China's first emperor, but also the intellectual, administrative, and cultural foundations upon which a unified Chinese civilization would rest for millennia. The chaos of fragmentation gave birth to an enduring order, the lessons of ambition and brutality shaping policies, ideals, and institutions long after the last battles had ended. As the Zhou Dynasty faded into ceremonial obscurity, the 7 warring states emerged as the central actors in the drama of late pre-imperial China. Each possessed its own geography, culture, and ambitions, creating a landscape where diplomacy and war were constant and where the balance of power shifted as quickly as alliances were forged and broken. Understanding the character of these states illuminates not only the strategies and battles that define the era, but also the social, economic, and philosophical currents that would shape China for centuries. In the rugged western lands of the Wei River Valley, Qin developed a reputation for discipline, endurance, and ruthless efficiency. Its terrain, mountainous and difficult, protected it from early incursions, yet it also demanded ingenuity in agriculture and infrastructure. Qin's rulers, keenly aware of the state's peripheral status relative to the Central Plains, invested heavily in fortifications, roads, and canals. They standardized weights, measures, and even legal codes to tighten control and enhance efficiency. Qin's military system reflected the state's emphasis on strength and organization. Generals such as Bai Qi and Wang Jian became legendary for their strategic cunning, able to mobilize hundreds of thousands of men across vast distances with precision. Qin's armies were not mere instruments of conquest. They were the backbone of a bureaucracy designed to centralize authority, subdue rivals, and enforce reforms at home. Legalist thought guided Qin's internal governance, emphasizing strict law, merit-based promotion, and the suppression of noble privilege. By the mid-3rd century BCE, Qin's combination of military discipline, administrative rigor, and strategic vision positioned it as a formidable force capable of confronting and ultimately absorbing all its rivals. To the south, the state of Chu sprawled across the fertile plains of the Yangtze, a land of rivers, forests, and abundant resources. Chu was culturally distinct from the northern states, blending Shangzhou traditions with influences from the southern tribes. Its rulers commanded vast populations and drew upon rich agricultural surpluses to support enormous armies. Chu's ambitions were often tempered by internal divisions and courtly intrigues, yet it remained one of the era's most potent powers. Generals like Xiang Yan exemplified Chu's ability to marshal resources and employed tactical ingenuity, holding back Qin armies for years. Chu's political and cultural vibrancy made it not only a military player, but also a hub of intellectual and artistic development, contributing significantly to the era's flourishing philosophical discourse. Situated on the Shandong Peninsula, Qi commanded fertile lands and a thriving economy bolstered by trade and agriculture. Its rulers were renowned for both wealth and sophistication, attracting scholars, diplomats, and artisans. Qi's strategic location allowed it to control important sea routes and overland corridors, giving it leverage over both neighbors and distant states. Qi's armies were highly disciplined and well-equipped, benefiting from innovations in iron weaponry, crossbows, and coordinated infantry tactics. Politically astute, Qi often maneuvered through alliances and marriages to expand influence without resorting solely to warfare, though it was not above demonstrating military might when necessary. Zhao occupied the northern plains, bordering the steppes. Its exposure to nomadic incursions necessitated a strong cavalry and mobile tactics. Zhao's leaders invested heavily in fortifications and defensive networks, while also cultivating an aggressive military tradition capable of striking deep into enemy territory. Zhao's position between rival states made diplomacy and rapid military response essential, and its generals, such as Li Mu, excelled at balancing offense and defense, employing both strategic retreats and decisive attacks to maintain the state's integrity. The remaining states, Han, Wei, and Yan, occupied crucial strategic positions. Han, wedged between Qin and Wei, often relied on cunning diplomacy and strategic concessions to survive. Wei, centered in the Central Plains, benefited from fertile farmland and a strong bureaucracy, though it frequently suffered from internal factionalism. Yan, in the northeast, faced both rival states and the nomadic threats from the steppes, requiring a blend of fortifications, strategic marriages, and selective military engagement to maintain its sovereignty. While smaller than Qin, Chu, and Qi, these states remained essential players, capable of influencing alliances, trade, and the course of campaigns through careful maneuvering. As ambitions escalated, the states engaged in a sophisticated web of diplomacy, often described as the vertical and horizontal alliances. Vertical alliances united weaker states against a single dominant power, typically Qin, while horizontal alliances involved more opportunistic pairings between powerful states to check rivals or expand influence. States employed envoys, spies, and skilled negotiators to manipulate these alliances, with the success or failure of a single diplomat sometimes determining the fate of armies or entire regions. The strategic environment was thus as perilous as the battlefield, with each ruler navigating a complex lattice of loyalties, rivalries, and betrayals. The turbulence of the Warring States era inspired an extraordinary intellectual flowering. Scholars and philosophers developed systems of thought that sought to explain the chaos and propose solutions for governance and society. Confucianism emphasized ethical leadership, ritual propriety, and moral cultivations, the foundation of order. Taoism counseled harmony with nature, simplicity, and non-interference in human affairs, offering a counterpoint to the relentless struggle for power. Legalism, embraced most rigorously by Qin, argued that strict laws and centralized authority were necessary to control human selfishness and maintain stability. These philosophies did not exist in isolation. They interacted dynamically with political practice, shaping reforms, influencing military strategy, and informing the governance of both peasants and elites. The intellectual diversity of the era reflected a society grappling with profound questions of morality, power, and survival, even as war raged across its territories. Beyond the battlefields, the Warring States era witnessed remarkable economic and social development. Agriculture advanced through irrigation, iron plowing, and large-scale land management. Markets and urban centers grew, fueled by trade networks that extended along rivers and newly constructed roads. States invested in canals, bridges, and transportation systems, facilitating both commerce and military logistics. These developments enabled the maintenance of massive armies and the rapid movement of supplies, creating a feedback loop in which economic capacity directly enhanced military capability. Social mobility, while limited, increased for skilled administrators, engineers, and military officers, forming a new class of meritocratic elites who could rise through talent rather than birth alone. The labor demands of infrastructure and warfare imposed burdens on peasants, yet they also generated opportunities for advancement and participation in the broader economic life of the states. The Warring States period was defined as much by the roar of armies and the clang of iron as by political intrigue and philosophical debate. Unlike the chivalric skirmishes of earlier eras, warfare in this period was total, merciless, and transformative. Battles were not mere confrontations between nobles. They were immense operations involving hundreds of thousands of soldiers, extensive logistical planning, and a strategic interplay of psychology, terrain, and technology. The very survival of a state depended on its ability to innovate in administration and strategy, to raise and sustain massive armies, and to anticipate the moves of rival powers whose ambitions were as relentless as their own. In the early Zhou period, warfare had been a ceremonial affair, dominated by chariots and the noble class. By the Warring States era, that model had been replaced by massed infantry, mounted cavalry, and highly disciplined armies. The advent of iron weaponry changed the dynamics of combat. Swords, spears, and crossbows could be produced in vast quantities, creating a military machine that dwarfed previous armies in both scale and effectiveness. Chariots, once symbols of aristocratic valor, had become tactical tools rather than decisive instruments of battle. Commanders began to employ formations, signaling, and coordinated maneuvers that reflected a sophisticated understanding of logistics and battlefield psychology. Retreats could be feigned, ambushes orchestrated, and supply lines manipulated to starve out entire forces without a single frontal clash. Crossbows in particular revolutionized warfare, allowing foot soldiers to deliver lethal volleys from a distance, reducing the advantage of individual skill and making discipline and coordination paramount. Armies were organized into strict hierarchies with officers responsible for enforcing order, maintaining morale, and ensuring the movement of supplies. Engineers and laborers accompanied campaigns to construct siege engines, pontoon bridges, and fortifications, while intelligence networks, spies, informants, and scouts kept generals aware of enemy movements and intentions. In every sense, war had become industrialized, enormous in scale, meticulously planned, and devastating in execution. No conflict better illustrates the ruthless intensity of this era than the Battle of Changping in 260 BCE. Qin, under the command of the legendary general Bai Qi, sought to subdue Zhao, a northern power whose position made it a persistent threat. Zhao assembled an army of some 450,000 men, drawn from the peasant population and led by its own capable commanders. The confrontation was not simply a test of arms, but of endurance, logistics, and psychological fortitude. Bai Qi implemented a strategy of encirclement, attrition, and deception. Zhao's forces, trapped and starving, eventually surrendered, only to be met with the grim efficiency of Qin's reprisals. Tens of thousands of prisoners were executed. The sheer scale of this massacre stunned contemporaries and sent a warning to other states of the ruthless efficiency of Qin. The battle demonstrated that success in the Warring States was measured not merely by victory, but by the ability to decisively incapacitate rivals and remove threats to long-term dominance. Meanwhile, in the east, Qi faced the state of Wei in the Battle of Maling in 342 BCE. Unlike Changping, which relied on attrition, Maling was a triumph of tactical ingenuity and psychological warfare. The Qi general Sun Bin feigned weakness, drawing Wei into an ambush in terrain chosen to maximize the effectiveness of crossbow volleys and infantry maneuvers. Over several days, Wei's troops were systematically outmaneuvered, suffering catastrophic losses. The victory not only showcased Qi's tactical sophistication, but also highlighted the increasingly cerebral nature of warfare in the period. Military skill extended beyond brute strength to include deception, intelligence, and precise execution of complex plans. The northern plains, vulnerable to incursions from nomadic tribes as well as rival states, forced Zhao to develop a distinctive military character. Zhao's emphasis on cavalry and mobile infantry allowed it to respond rapidly to threats and engage enemies across diverse terrain. Generals like Li Mu exemplified the state's adaptability. He implemented defensive fortifications, trained troops rigorously, and emphasized strategic retreats when necessary. Zhao's military practices reflected a broader theme of the era. Survival depended as much on resilience and foresight as on aggressive expansion. To the south, Chu relied on its vast resources and population to sustain enormous armies. Its generals were capable of halting Qin advances temporarily, utilizing the dense forests and river networks of the Yangtze Basin to stage ambushes and defensive maneuvers. The southern campaigns illustrated the diversity of military practice in the warring states. Geography, climate, and culture shaped not only tactics, but the very composition and training of armies. Chu's ability to draw upon regional manpower and resources allowed it to remain a persistent threat to Qin's ambitions for decades, demonstrating that even a smaller or more decentralized state could resist larger powers through ingenuity and strategic use of its environment. What distinguished successful states in the Warring States period was not just tactical brilliance, but the capacity to sustain warfare over long periods. Roads, canals, and storage facilities became as crucial as swords and crossbows. In Qin, extensive road networks allowed rapid deployment of troops across the state and into enemy territories. Grain, weapons, and equipment could be moved efficiently, supporting campaigns far from the heartland. Supply depots, fortified along key routes, ensured that even extended operations could continue without collapse. This infrastructure represented a transformation in the art of war. Campaigns were no longer constrained by local resources, but were supported by state planning and administrative efficiency on a scale unprecedented in Chinese history. Military strategy alone could not guarantee survival or success. The era's rulers were acutely aware that diplomacy was itself a form of warfare. Alliances shifted frequently. States united against a stronger power, only to dissolve the coalition when advantageous. Envoys, spies, and secret negotiators moved through courts, planting disinformation, inciting rebellions, or bribing officials. The so-called vertical and horizontal alliances were instruments of both defense and aggression, demonstrating that intellectual cunning could determine outcomes as decisively as battlefield prowess. A state that failed in diplomacy often faced invasion, whereas clever use of alliances could offset numerical or geographic disadvantages. The scale and intensity of warring states' campaigns exacted a profound toll on society. Peasants were conscripted into massive armies, often facing death in sieges, ambushes, or forced marches. Cities could be sacked, populations enslaved, or relocated en masse. Famines often accompanied war, as fields were burned or requisitioned to feed armies. Yet, amid these hardships, the era stimulated social and economic innovation. Administrative positions opened to talented commoners, trade expanded to supply armies and fortifications, and engineering projects, roads, canals, defensive walls reshaped the landscape. The crucible of war accelerated the development of a centralized, bureaucratic state, preparing the ground for eventual unification under Qin. While the clang of iron and the thunder of armies dominated the Warring States period, the era's true legacy extended far beyond the battlefield. Amid the ceaseless campaigns and the blood-soaked plains, a remarkable transformation unfolded in society, culture, economy, and thought. The turbulence of the time spurred innovations in governance, commerce, infrastructure, and philosophy, leaving an indelible imprint on the development of Chinese civilization. The social hierarchy of the Warring States era was complex and evolving. At the top were the kings and ruling elites, whose authority was enforced through armies, bureaucracies, and laws. Below them, the noble classes managed territories, raised levies, and administered justice, often leveraging centuries-old family networks and inherited prestige. Yet the decline of the Zhou Dynasty's central authority, combined with the rise of meritocratic legalist practices, created openings for talented individuals outside the aristocracy to ascend in rank. Scholar officials, military strategists, and administrators could rise based on skill rather than birth, especially in states like Qin, where legalist reforms dismantled many hereditary privileges. The peasantry, however, bore the brunt of the era's pressures. Farmers labored to produce enough food to sustain vast armies and expanding urban centers. Taxation and conscription were heavy, often leaving little for personal sustenance, and wartime disruptions could lead to famine or displacement. Despite these hardships, the period witnessed incremental opportunities for social mobility. Successful merchants, engineers, and skilled craftsmen could attain positions of influence, participate in local markets, and accumulate wealth that occasionally translated into political leverage. Guilds and local associations began to emerge, regulating trade and protecting interests, a precursor to more organized commercial structures in later centuries. Cities grew in size and complexity as administrative, military, and economic hubs. Capitals such as Xianyang in Qin or Handan in Zhao became centers of governance, housing bureaucrats, advisors, soldiers, artisans, and merchants. These cities were not only political nodes, but also cultural centers where philosophical debates, artistic creation, and technological experimentation thrived, illustrating the interconnection between urbanization and intellectual activity. The relentless demands of warfare and governance fueled economic innovation. Agriculture expanded through the adoption of iron tools, improved plowing techniques, and sophisticated irrigation systems that allowed cultivation on previously marginal lands. The resulting surplus supported large standing armies and facilitated population growth, which in turn provided labor for further expansion and military recruitment. Infrastructure projects multiplied during this period, reflecting the dual needs of economic efficiency and military logistics. Roads, canals, and bridges crisscrossed the landscape, connecting capitals with outlying provinces and enabling the rapid movement of troops and supplies. These networks also facilitated trade, allowing merchants to transport goods across the states, while marketplaces grew into vibrant centers of exchange. State-sponsored granaries and storage facilities ensured reserves during sieges or famines, reflecting the increasing sophistication of governmental planning. In Qin, the legalist emphasis on efficiency and centralization led to uniform standards of weights, measures, and even axle lengths for carts, which simplified transport and trade across the realm and laid the groundwork for the unified imperial economy. Markets and artisanship flourished alongside these developments. Iron casting became widespread, producing not only weapons but also agricultural implements, thereby increasing productivity. Pottery, lacquerware, and textiles reflected both aesthetic refinement and functional innovation, while the standardization of coinage in several states facilitated long-distance commerce. Trade was no longer purely local. Goods such as salt, iron, silk, and grain moved across state borders, fostering economic interdependence even amid political rivalry. Amid the turmoil, intellectual life reached extraordinary heights as scholars sought to explain, justify, or alleviate the chaos surrounding them. The Warring States era is often described as the 100 schools of thought, a flowering of diverse philosophical traditions, each responding to the uncertainties and pressures of the time. Confucianism emphasized moral virtue, hierarchical order, and proper conduct. Confucius had long argued that society would be harmonious if rulers acted benevolently and subjects fulfilled their obligations. His disciples and later thinkers, such as Mencius and Sun Tzu, expanded these ideas. Mencius stressed the innate goodness of humans and the obligation of rulers to govern ethically, warning that injustice could lead to rebellion. Sun Tzu, in contrast, argued that humans were inherently self-interested and required education and ritual to maintain social order. Confucianism thus provided a framework for moral governance, advising rulers on cultivating respect, loyalty, and ethical conduct even amid political fragmentation. Taoism, in contrast, advocated simplicity, natural harmony, and non-interference. Laozi and Zhuangzi described a world in which human ambition and conflict disrupted the natural order, and they urged rulers and citizens alike to align with the Tao, the underlying rhythm of existence. Taoist thought offered philosophical refuge from constant warfare, encouraging reflection, moderation, and acceptance of life's inherent flux. This school also influenced artistic and literary expression, inspiring poetry, painting, and meditative practices that emphasized spontaneity and the beauty of the natural world. Legalism became the guiding philosophy of Qin and, by extension, the future imperial order. Legalists such as Shang Yang and Han Fei argued that human nature was selfish and prone to disorder. Only through strict laws, centralized authority, and merit-based bureaucratic systems could society be controlled. Legalist reforms in Qin abolished the hereditary privileges of nobles, standardized administrative practices, and rewarded military and civil service based on performance rather than lineage. The focus on efficiency, control, and discipline enabled Qin to mobilize vast resources and sustain campaigns that ultimately conquered all other states, establishing the first unified Chinese empire. Other schools also contributed to the intellectual richness of the era. Mohism promoted universal love, practical governance, and frugality, while the yin-yang and five-element schools explored cosmology, natural phenomena, and their application to politics and medicine. Collectively, these philosophies reflect a society grappling with profound questions of morality, governance, and human nature, producing ideas that would resonate for millennia. Although the seven states shared a common Chinese heritage, they maintained distinctive cultural identities. Chu, for example, retained southern customs and artistic styles, blending elements from the indigenous tribes of the Yangtze region with Zhou traditions. Qin, situated on the western frontier, emphasized martial discipline and administrative rigor, developing a pragmatic culture focused on efficiency and state power. Qi cultivated scholarly and commercial sophistication, while Zhao and Yan adapted to the challenges of northern geography and nomadic incursions. These differences manifested not only in governance and military organization, but also in art, ritual, language, and social practices, creating a tapestry of regional diversity even as shared Confucian, Taoist, and legalist ideas permeated broader society. By the mid-3rd century BCE, the Warring States period had reached a stage of unparalleled intensity. The major powers, Qin, Chu, Zhao, Qi, Wei, Han, and Yan, had been locked in cycles of conquest, alliance, and attrition for over 2 centuries. The constant warfare had exhausted populations, reshaped economies, and transformed social structures. Amid this turbulence, one state began to rise with remarkable speed: Chen Ti. Its combination of legalist governance, disciplined military, and administrative efficiency set the stage for the unification of China, an achievement that would forever alter the course of history. Qin's rise was not accidental. Its geographic position on the western periphery, long regarded by rivals as a sign of relative backwardness, proved to be a decisive strategic advantage. Shielded by rugged mountain ranges and deep river valleys, Qin enjoyed formidable natural defenses that limited enemy incursions and reduced the need for constant frontier warfare. This security afforded Qin the rare opportunity to consolidate internally, while eastern states exhausted themselves in prolonged, mutually destructive conflicts. Crucially, Qin exploited this respite through sweeping institutional transformation. Legalist reforms, first systematized under Shangyang and rigorously upheld by successive rulers, dismantled the entrenched privileges of hereditary aristocracies and replaced them with a centralized, impersonal system of governance. Authority flowed directly from the ruler through standardized laws rather than through noble intermediaries, ensuring uniform administration across the state. Civil and military offices were awarded on the basis of performance, not lineage, binding personal advancement to service of the state. These reforms penetrated every level of society. Households were registered and organized into mutual responsibility groups, enabling efficient taxation, conscription, and surveillance. Agricultural production was incentivized through land redistribution and rewards for surplus output, transforming Qin into a state capable of sustaining large standing armies over extended campaigns. Military ranks and honors were granted strictly according to battlefield achievement, fostering discipline, cohesion, and a relentless competitive ethos among soldiers. Over time, this combination of geographic security, administrative centralization, and meritocratic discipline produced a polity uniquely suited to total war. While rival states remained constrained by aristocratic factionalism and uneven enforcement of policy, Qin functioned as a tightly integrated war machine. Its rise thus reflected not merely tactical superiority, but a deeper structural transformation, one that converted the pressures of the warring states' world into a source of enduring strength and positioned Qin to overwhelm its rivals and impose a new political order on the Chinese world. Roads, canals, and granaries ensured efficient movement of armies and supplies, while standardized weights, measures, and cart axles facilitated trade and resource mobilization. This integration of civil, economic, and military systems gave Qin an extraordinary capacity to sustain long campaigns and recover rapidly from losses. A critical advantage in a time when other states struggled with internal strife and depleted resources. Qin's unification campaign began with its weaker neighbors. Han, trapped between Qin and Wei, succumbed first. Qin employed both military force and strategic deception, exploiting internal divisions and deploying well-coordinated sieges to capture key cities. The state's administrative efficiency allowed it to rapidly integrate Han territories, collecting taxes, reorganizing local governance, and securing supply lines for further campaigns. Wei, located in the Central Plains, posed a more formidable challenge. Its fertile lands and strong cities made direct assault costly. Qin responded with a combination of diplomacy and warfare, isolating Wei from potential allies and launching multiple coordinated offensives. Rivers and canals were leveraged for troop movement and logistical support, allowing Qin to bypass heavily fortified positions and strike where Wei was weakest. Gradually, Wei's defenses crumbled and the state was absorbed, further solidifying Qin's path to dominance. Zhao, with its northern position and emphasis on cavalry, had long been a resilient power. Its generals, including the renowned Li Mu, had defended against both Qin and nomadic incursions from the steppes. Yet even Zhao's skill and strategic depth could not withstand Qin's relentless pressure. After initial defeats and protracted sieges, Qin systematically dismantled Zhao's defensive network. Cities fell one by one, with garrisons overwhelmed by superior coordination, siege tactics, and logistical support. The capture of Handan, Zhao's capital, marked a decisive turning point. The once mighty northern state was now subjugated, its lands incorporated into Qin's expanding empire. Chu, the southern giant, represented Qin's most formidable challenge. Its population, resources, and diverse geography made it difficult to conquer. Chu's generals employed rivers, forests, and mountains to stage ambushes and defend key territories, prolonging resistance. Nevertheless, Qin's superior organization, disciplined armies, and legalist administrative machinery allowed gradual encroachment. Multiple campaigns over decades weakened Chu's defenses and morale. Eventually, Qin armies penetrated deep into the heart of Chu, capturing its cities, dismantling resistance, and securing the south. This conquest demonstrated the adaptability of Qin's military strategy and the effectiveness of sustained pressure over time. Yan, located in the northeast, faced both the threat of Qin and the pressures of northern nomadic tribes. While geographically distant from the Western power, Yan could not escape the fate of its neighbors. Qin's campaigns combined direct assault with strategic isolation, ensuring that Yan could not call upon allies for support. Cities were captured in sequence, and by the time Qin turned its full attention to the northeast, Yan's capacity for organized resistance had been exhausted. Qi, located on the eastern coast, was one of the last independent states. Its wealth, naval potential, and fertile lands offered the possibility of prolonged resistance. However, after decades of observing the fates of other states, Qi's leaders concluded that opposition to Qin was futile. In 221 BCE, Qin's armies crossed into Qi territory, facing minimal resistance. Qi was absorbed peacefully, its integration into the empire facilitated by pragmatic negotiation and careful administration. The culmination of these campaigns was the ascension of Qin Shi Huangdi, the first emperor of China. Declaring himself Huangdi, a title combining the notions of divine rulership and earthly authority, he transformed Qin from a conquering state into a centralized empire. The legalist principles that had guided Qin's rise were extended across the unified territories. Nobles were relocated to prevent local power bases from challenging imperial authority. Standardized writing, weights, measures, and currency facilitated administration and commerce. Roads, canals, and fortifications were expanded to unify distant regions physically and administratively. The emperor's vision was absolute. China was no longer a patchwork of independent states, but a singular polity under centralized rule, capable of sustaining unprecedented levels of governance, economic activity, and military strength. The unification of China under Qin marked both an end and a beginning. Centuries of fragmentation, conflict, and innovation had culminated in a single empire, setting the precedent for imperial governance that would endure for millennia. The Warring States era had fostered unprecedented developments in military strategy, administration, economic organization, and philosophical thought. Confucian, Taoist, and legalist ideas continued to influence governance and society, while infrastructure projects, standardization, and urbanization created a foundation for future imperial expansion. The scale of warfare, the sophistication of administration, and the intellectual ferment of the period left a profound imprint on Chinese civilization, demonstrating that even an age of chaos could produce enduring order and cultural achievement. The unification under Qin was not merely political. It was a transformation of the landscape, the economy, the military, and the very concept of authority. The emperor's vision of centralized power, codified laws, and disciplined bureaucracy reflected lessons learned during centuries of competition among the warring states. This synthesis of military conquest, administrative innovation, and philosophical application created the first enduring Chinese empire, an achievement whose consequences shaped the trajectory of East Asia for the next 2,000 years. The Warring States period did not conclude simply with the conquest of the final independent kingdoms. Its deeper significance lay in how profoundly it reshaped Chinese civilization. The era forged new political ideas, transformed society, and redefined warfare and governance in ways that endured long after the Qin banners were lowered and the first emperor's dynasty collapsed. What emerged from the chaos was not merely a unified territory, but a new conception of order, authority, and the relationship between state and society. Before the Warring States era, power in China had largely rested with hereditary aristocracies bound by kinship, ritual obligation, and feudal loyalty to the Zhou kings. By the late Warring States period, this system had been irrevocably dismantled. Continuous warfare demanded efficiency rather than pedigree. States increasingly relied on appointed officials, professional generals, and administrators selected for competence rather than birth. This shift transformed governance. Land was surveyed, taxed, and redistributed according to state needs. Populations were registered, households counted, and labor obligations enforced with unprecedented precision. These practices, refined during centuries of conflict, became standard features of imperial rule. Later dynasties inherited not only Qin's territorial unity, but also the administrative DNA forged in the Warring States crucible. The scale and brutality of Warring States warfare marked a decisive break from earlier traditions. Battles were no longer ritualized encounters between noble elites. They were struggles for annihilation. Entire regions were depopulated, cities razed, and survivors relocated. Victory depended on logistics as much as valor, on supply chains, fortifications, intelligence networks, and disciplined command structures. Military innovation accelerated accordingly. Iron weapons replaced bronze on a mass scale. Crossbows standardized killing power across social classes, allowing conscripted peasants to stand alongside professional soldiers. Cavalry, siege engines, and complex battlefield formations reflected a growing sophistication in military science. Texts such as The Art of War distilled these experiences into strategic principles that would influence military thinking far beyond ancient China. The cost was staggering. Casualties numbered in the hundreds of thousands, and the psychological toll on society was immense. Yet this devastation forced states to confront fundamental questions: how to govern effectively, how to mobilize resources, and how to maintain stability in a world defined by perpetual conflict. The Warring States period is often remembered as the golden age of Chinese philosophy, an era when thinkers sought answers to the disorder surrounding them. Confucianism, Taoism, legalism, Mohism, and other schools competed for influence, offering rival visions of how society should be organized and how rulers should govern. Confucian thinkers emphasized moral cultivation, social harmony, and the restoration of ethical order through ritual and education. Taoist philosophers responded differently, advocating withdrawal from artificial constraints and alignment with the natural flow of the universe. Legalists rejected moral idealism altogether, arguing that only strict laws, harsh punishments, and centralized authority could control human selfishness and ensure stability. These philosophies were not abstract debates. They were tested in practice. Rulers adopted, modified, or discarded ideas based on results. Qin's embrace of legalism proved militarily effective, though deeply unpopular, while later dynasties would temper legalist structures with Confucian ethics. The synthesis of these schools became one of the defining characteristics of Chinese political culture. For ordinary people, the Warring States era was a time of immense hardship and limited opportunity. Mass conscription, heavy taxation, and forced labor placed enormous burdens on rural populations. Yet the same pressures also loosened rigid social hierarchies. Talent, whether military or administrative, could propel individuals of humble origin into positions of influence. Merchants, engineers, and strategists gained prominence as states competed to attract capable minds. Economic life expanded alongside warfare. Agricultural innovations increased yields, while roads and canals facilitated trade across regions. Cities grew as administrative and military hubs, drawing artisans, traders, and officials into expanding urban centers. Despite constant violence, these developments laid the groundwork for a more integrated economy under imperial rule. Although the warring states were culturally distinct, with regional customs, dialects, and traditions, the prolonged interaction among them fostered a shared sense of civilization. Diplomatic exchanges, philosophical debates, and the movement of scholars and soldiers spread ideas across borders. Over time, a common written language and shared historical consciousness emerged, reinforcing a sense of collective identity even amid division. This shared heritage made unification possible. When Qin imposed standardization across the empire of script, measurements, and law, it was building upon trends already underway. The Warring States era had prepared the cultural and institutional foundations necessary for a unified China to function. The Qin dynasty's swift collapse after the death of Qin Shi Huangdi revealed the limits of coercion. While legalist structures enabled unification, their rigidity and harshness alienated the population. Rebellions erupted, and within a generation, the dynasty fell. Yet the imperial framework remained intact. Successor dynasties retained Qin's centralized model while softening its excesses, blending legalist administration with Confucian moral philosophy. In this sense, the Warring States era achieved its final victory not through Qin alone, but through the system it made possible. The lessons learned during centuries of conflict about power, governance, and human nature became embedded in the fabric of Chinese civilization. The Warring States period stands as one of the most transformative epochs in world history. Born from the collapse of Zhou authority, it unfolded as a relentless struggle for survival and supremacy among rival states. Its wars were brutal, its politics ruthless, and its human cost immense. Yet from this turmoil emerged innovations in governance, military organization, philosophy, and culture that reshaped China permanently. The era dismantled the old feudal order and replaced it with centralized, bureaucratic states capable of mobilizing entire societies. It transformed warfare into a science of logistics, discipline, and strategy. It inspired philosophers to confront the deepest questions of order, morality, and power. And it fostered a shared cultural identity that transcended regional divisions. When Qin Shi Huangdi declared himself emperor in 221 BCE, he did more than conquer rival states. He inherited the cumulative legacy of centuries of experimentation, suffering, and adaptation. The unified empire was not an abrupt creation, but the culmination of processes set in motion during the Warring States era. In memory and meaning, the Warring States period endures as a paradox, an age of chaos that gave birth to order, a time of destruction that forged enduring institutions, and an era of division that ultimately defined unity. Its legacy continued to shape Chinese history for over 2,000 years, influencing how power was exercised, how society was organized, and how civilization understood itself. Long after the clangor of bronze and iron had faded, the Warring States era continued to live in memory, text, and tradition. Later generations looked back upon it with a mixture of dread and reverence, seeing in it both a warning and a foundation. It was remembered as a time when the world seemed to fracture beyond repair, yet also as the crucible in which the enduring structures of Chinese civilization were forged. Historians of later dynasties often framed the period as a moral lesson. The chaos of incessant warfare was attributed to the collapse of ritual order and the moral failings of rulers who pursued ambition without restraint. At the same time, the achievements of the era, its administrative sophistication, its philosophical richness, and its eventual unification were acknowledged as necessary stages in the maturation of the state. In this dual interpretation, the Warring States period became both a cautionary tale and a necessary prelude to imperial stability. Imperial rulers repeatedly turned to the experiences of the Warring States for guidance. Confucian scholars cited the era to argue that moral governance was essential to prevent a return to fragmentation. Legalist administrators, though often publicly denounced, quietly drew upon the same principles of law, surveillance, and centralized authority that had allowed Qin to prevail. Taoist thinkers found in the era's excesses proof of the dangers of artificial control and relentless striving. This layered legacy meant that the Warring States period was never relegated to the distant past. It remained a living reference point, invoked in debates over taxation, military policy, bureaucratic reform, and the balance between authority and compassion. Even when dynasties differed sharply in ideology, they shared a common understanding that unchecked disorder could lead once again to the horrors of that age. Literature and storytelling further preserved the emotional resonance of the era. Tales of loyal ministers, tragic generals, cunning strategists, and doomed kings circulated for centuries, shaping popular imagination. Figures such as Sun Bin, Wu Qi, Shang Yang, and the generals of Changping became archetypes, symbols of brilliance, ruthlessness, loyalty, or tragedy. These stories were not merely entertainment. They conveyed values, fears, and aspirations rooted in collective memory. The sheer scale of suffering during the Warring States period also left an imprint on cultural attitudes toward war. While military achievement was admired, war itself was often portrayed as a last resort, a necessary evil rather than a noble pursuit. This ambivalence would characterize Chinese attitudes toward conflict throughout much of imperial history. Behind the grand narratives of conquest and unification lay countless untold lives. Farmers conscripted into armies, families uprooted by forced relocations, artisans pressed into state service, and civilians caught in the path of advancing armies formed the silent majority of the era. Archaeological evidence, mass graves, abandoned settlements, and hastily constructed fortifications attests to the depth of trauma endured by ordinary people. Yet even within this suffering, resilience emerged. Communities adapted, rebuilt, and learned to navigate the demands of powerful states. The survival of social structures, cultural practices, and family lineages through centuries of warfare speaks to the endurance of human societies even under extreme pressure. The ultimate achievement of the Warring States era was not simply unification, but continuity. By resolving the question of political authority, by demonstrating that a single, centralized state could dominate the vast and diverse lands of China, the era established a model that future generations would rarely abandon. Even during later periods of division, the ideal of unity remained powerful, shaping ambitions and legitimizing rule. This continuity did not mean stagnation. On the contrary, the imperial system that emerged remained dynamic, evolving in response to new challenges while retaining the core structures forged during the Warring States. The balance between law and morality, central authority and local administration, military power and civil governance continued to be negotiated within the framework established during that formative age. The Warring States period occupies a unique place in history, an era defined by relentless competition, profound suffering, and extraordinary creativity. It was a time when the old world collapsed and a new one struggled to be born, when thinkers and rulers alike sought answers to chaos and glimpsed the possibility of enduring order. In retrospect, the era reveals the paradox at the heart of human history. that progress often emerges from crisis, and that the structures enabling stability are frequently forged in moments of extreme instability. The Warring States period, for all its violence, produced ideas and institutions that shaped not only China, but broader understandings of governance, strategy, and society. Its legacy endures not merely in textbooks or chronicles, but in the continued emphasis on unity, order, and moral responsibility that has characterized Chinese civilization for over 2 millennia. In this sense, the Warring States era never truly ended. It became part of the foundation upon which history continued to unfold, a reminder of what is lost in chaos and what can be built in its aftermath. As the Warring States era drew to a close, China emerged forever changed. Centuries of conflict, ambition, and innovation had torn the old world apart. Yet from that chaos arose the foundations of empire, philosophy, and governance that would shape East Asia for more than 2,000 years. The unification under Qin was not the end of history, but the beginning of a new chapter forged by the trials of this relentless age. The echoes of these rival states, Qin, Chu, Zhao, Qi, Han, Yan, and Wei, still resonate through Chinese political thought, military strategy, and cultural identity. Their wars reshaped the land, their thinkers reshaped the mind, and their struggles answered a question that had haunted the age itself: how order might emerge from division. If you found this exploration of the Warring States period insightful, consider subscribing for more in-depth journeys into the ancient world. New episodes continue to examine the civilizations, conflicts, and ideas that shaped human history. Thank you for watching, and until next time, history continues.